city administrator are presenting. It will be released to the public today on our website at 5:30. We have a summary that we passed out in the news release that gives you an overview of some of the reorganizational changes and reductions that are proposed. We'll start out with remarks by Mayor Quan. City Administrator Deanna Santana is going to give you an overview of the changes, and then for questions we have Assistant City Administrator Fred Blackwell, Assistant City Administrator Scott Johnson, and Budget Director Sabrina Landry here to answer questions after this. Thanks.
Good afternoon. A little less than a couple of weeks ago, about 3 weeks ago on New Year's Eve, we learned that the California Supreme Court ruled the way no one quite expected. They, on one hand, struck down or sustained the legislature's right to eliminate redevelopment, and then struck down the companion bill, which would allow redevelopment to continue by getting more funds, and that is basically what Oakland was operating under, as many other cities were. Well, I'm still hopeful that there will either be an extension or legislation that will continue the core functions of redevelopment. Until that happens, we have to assume that we have to meet the court order and that we have to dissolve the redevelopment agency on February 1st. It has not been easy. The city staff has been working day and night for weekends. We were here very late last night. We're still tweaking different programs. We, as Oakland, as one of the older cities, we're going to be 160 years old in May, with one of the higher concentrations of poverty, with a lot of transit opportunities, a lot of transit housing. Use redevelopment more than many cities, I think, in the state. But statewide, almost every city is making some reductions or some cuts. Or San Francisco's unique as a city and county. LA has basically said, you do it state, they have a separate agency. But most cities are making some reductions. What we decided, because Oakland has been undergoing reforming our budget, strengthening our budget, and this year balance its budgets with the strongest reserves and handling a $58 million deficit, largely and thankfully to our employees' contributions. We had much less to cut, and we realized that we just couldn't cut in the regular way. You trim a little bit here, a little bit there. We had been planning to, and this now speeds up, to reorganize the city, to merge departments, to cut administrative levels, to look at how we could do things differently. And that's basically what we've done here. We've not just made the redevelopment cuts, but we've reorganized so that we could save public services and the staff that supports them to the largest extent possible. What you're seeing here is a proposal which has much fewer layoffs than you would expect just from redevelopment. That is why we organized it very broadly. So you'll see we're going to have less departments, we're going to have more emergency departments, we're going to have less administrators. And in the end, we did our best to make sure that there are no cuts or minimal cuts to core services. So there'll be no cuts to libraries, there'll be no cuts to human services, there will be minimal cuts to police and fire, it's still going to be very tough. Local government gets hit by federal and state cuts, and they're now hit by the redevelopment cuts. It's going to be very difficult, and it couldn't have happened without the cooperation of our employees. The employees gave us some good ideas. Our staff's been working, and we've taken on a much broader cut than just redevelopment here. Our budget is still balanced. We still have a full reserve. The city is on generally good economic standing for our bond rating agencies and to move forward. This is very tough. I think long-term the elimination redevelopment will really hurt California cities' abilities to grow as the economy picks up. But this is what we've been dealt, and we're handling it. So I just want to repeat, we are probably going to eliminate about 100 positions in total. We have not cut any of the core services, libraries, human services, police and fire, minimal little cuts in reorganization. We've done this mostly by flattening the organization, cutting administrative positions, and merging some departments. And Deanna Santana, who's been working very hard on that, will go into the details. We want to thank the staff, we want to thank the city, citizens of Oakland, in making this work to try to stretch our resources. We're going to need everybody's help. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Deanna Santana, City Administrator. I want to start by just going over some of the high-level numbers of the goal that we were trying to achieve to release a balanced budget. There has been a lot of confusion around what the actual numbers are, and I think at this point we've focused in on what the shortfall is, as well as the projected revenue for moving forward. Looking at fiscal year 2011-2012, when all was said and done on a prorated basis, the city is faced with a $12.4 million current year deficit. For next year, 2012-2013, the projected shortfall is $28 million. With the adoption of with the court ruling, we do know that we have 2 new revenue streams coming in. These are non-discretionary revenue streams. We do need to expend them in the way outlined in the court ruling and legislation. The first new revenue stream is an administrative cost allowance. It starts in the first year at a 5%, and the second years and moving forward it's allocated at 3%. This revenue allows for wind down activities for administrative functions related to redevelopment. The other is the project staffing for enforceable obligations. When we combine these true revenue streams that are non-discretionary for 2011-2012, the revenue coming in is estimated at $4.25 million. For 2012-2013, the revenue estimated coming in is $7.75 million. So if you just do the math, shortfall plus revenue, the current year shortfall of what we had to resolve is for this current year, from February through June, is $8.2 million of a shortfall. And for next year, 2012-2013, $20.3 million. So those are the numbers. There are some assumptions. They're outlined in the budget document, as well as I think they're outlined in the press release. Let me say that our goal all along has been to maximize service delivery in the neighborhoods and for residents. We recognize that this organization has gone through several budget balancing processes where services were cut and jobs were eliminated. We looked at this as an opportunity to retool the organization, to position it for the future. And what we did simply is we looked at areas where we could merge functional areas where there was a natural nexus and consolidate departments. So let me talk a little bit in detail about 3 of the key consolidations that you will find in the budget proposal. The first is the CEDA agency is recommended to shift to offices. There's 4 new offices proposed. 2 of the 4 are strictly related to successor agency activities. So one is a housing successor agency function. The other is a neighborhood investment function, which will support wind down activities for the redevelopment agency. The other is shifting to a planning and neighborhood preservation office, which will merge planning and building services. And the last is creating a small economic development office. We think it's important that the city preserve its policy priority of economic development, and we've proposed a small office to grow those functions. By doing this alone, as I mentioned, we wanted to look at interesting ways or new ways of creating dollars internally and maximizing services in neighborhoods and for residents. We generated a savings of $1.2 million of central service overhead costs. That buys services on the street, and we found that extremely relevant to our efforts to maximize services. The other proposal builds off of a previous council direction where we are proposing to merge the Department of Human Services and Parks and Rec into what we would call a Community Services Department. And we propose implementation of that department beginning July 1st. So we'll have a little bit of time to reform the consolidated department and merge 2 key departments moving forward. The last is creating what's commonly structured now in a lot of other local governments is just an administrative services department where internal services departments are merged into one and are focused on supporting external services that directly go to neighborhood and residents. And you'll find in our proposal the consolidation of IT services, human resources, and for the time being, we're going to pan out finance and management services until we can organize the administrative services in a way that allows for it to be ready by July 1st. So between Scott, who is a former finance director, and Sabrina, who is our budget director, they will hold those responsibilities. That's the major reorg. There are a couple of other smaller details related to reorganization, but those are the ones that yielded the highest level of dollars so that we can maximize services. Additional proposals are related to community services. We are recommending that the lower use community centers close or reduce hours on Mondays, and that allowed for us to buy back some level of expanded services in other areas of higher use community centers between Tuesday and Sunday. There's a series of subsidies that the city has offered in the past. We are also recommending over time a wind down of subsidies to some nonprofit organizations, and a couple of other transfers of functions to other departments to lower central service overhead costs. So that's the high-level summary. I'm open for questions. I don't know if Fred wants to offer any comments on redevelopment or
I think the mayor touched on some cuts to public services or
for public safety.
Public safety. Can you
Absolutely.
talk about that?
I did forget that. So there are no proposed cuts to the sworn levels. We are proposing that we begin to migrate towards shared administrative services. There's one elimination position in the police department that there is a vacancy of a like position in the fire department, and we're asking for a dual support role of that staff person to support both police and fire in high-level administrative work. This begins the discussion of how can we merge functions like payroll, grants management, grants monitoring, the city council's legislative process, and other like services. I should also mention that we are proposing a reduction in our neighborhood services coordinators. Currently there's 9 FTEs. We are proposing to bring that down to 5, and then shifting that function to the proposed community services department.
As we do questions, can we, if you could please say your name and the affiliation?
Can I just correct one thing for the record? There was the statement, there are 105 full-time equivalent position eliminations proposed. The actual number, because we balanced the budget late last night, we're hoping to have that by close of business, so that number will be higher.
And the council could possibly choose other choices.
Then that number does not include any action on the part of the council or charter offices for additional reductions, although they are assigned a target in the budget.
So what does that mean in plain terms?
So,
because the mayor said about 100, so what does that really mean?
There's 105 full-time equivalents. If you look at the previous charts that we released last week, the redevelopment agency funded 159 full-time equivalents, and when we looked at the budget how positions were funded, it resulted in 228 actual positions. That's the exercise. Now that we have a balanced budget, HR is going through the exercise of finding out how do those actual full-time equivalents translate into positions. So it will be higher, but I don't have an exact number until the goal is close of business today.
Higher than 100 or higher than 200?
Higher than 105 full-time equivalent position elimination.
In other words, it went from 159 full-time equivalents down to about 105. How it actually turns out depends on bumping, depends on whether the council makes any changes.
So Jen was first.
Jennifer Ward for Oakland Local. I wonder if you could talk about your work with labor on this, particularly when it comes to the employee positions, and also if there's any updates on some of the redevelopment projects like the Oakland Army Base.
Let me start out and then let him do the Oakland. You know, I met with labor when I came back from Washington over this weekend, and they wanted to play a larger role, and they wanted to know what we were doing. But to be honest, we hadn't even finished our proposal until about midnight last night. And so as soon as it was as soon as it was available today, we had offered to meet with people. We're planning to meet with all the labor groups tomorrow. They want an opportunity to bring back some counter proposals. We have over a week before around the week before the council votes on the final proposal. You know, in best of times, we would have had less than a month to dismantle a whole agency. We've tried to do our best, and I've made a commitment to the labor groups that we'll have a committee that will meet on what the proposals are, and we'll listen to alternatives. And quite frankly, after this, we're going to continue to work. I think we worked really close together, and I wanted to make my statement to thank the unions, the fact that we are even where we were in July with one of the strongest budgets in a long time, one that the rating agencies were happy with, that had no financial tricks in it, that had a full reserve. We wouldn't have been there without our labor organizations who've been very professional working with us. And, you know, we didn't have a proposal even to discuss till last night, so I'm open and looking forward to discussing if they have any other suggestions, et cetera. But it's not a lot of time. Unless we get this extension from the state legislature, we have to move as quickly as possible, because every week to one pay period delay is almost $1 million more that we'd have to cut if the state stays with the February 1st date.
Could you repeat that?
That is, if the February 1st date stays the date that we're supposed to have disbanded and no longer charge the redevelopment agencies, with the numbers we have, the old number was about $1 million, and now it's a little less, so I'm going to say maybe 800,000. So every pay period we delay, we'll have to cut another 800,000. And so what we wanted to do is be able to do this if we had to, as efficiently. And there may be some departments that will take us more than that, but there's also some administrative cuts and changes that we could do immediately. And so it's not clean and neat. We wish it were, but we're doing our best so that we don't have to unnecessarily make more cuts that we're making already. I mean, I would like the legislature to understand that for cities like Oakland, this has been very, very tough and very painful for people, particularly if they do come back with sections of redevelopment. I would have liked to have had the legislative extension, so we'll see if we get it.
Before we go on to questions, there's a few more statements that the city administrator wanted to make.
On the labor side, during the week of January 9th, Luana and I, as well as another meeting, Fred Blackwell and I, did meet with SEIU and Local 21. Not a lot of information was available at that time in terms of assumptions that the state was making on the part of how to move forward. There was a series of questions that we could not answer, like many other local governments. Things became clearer last Wednesday as the Department of Finance issued an FAQ that further helped us in supporting our approach for how we've developed the budget. I also want to mention, though, in addition, we put out a citywide survey monkey on collecting revenue-generating or cost-saving ideas. That yielded a lot of good input, which we've summarized in the budget proposal, and some of which we've already noted and started to work on. So I do want to acknowledge that we did take a broader approach to outreaching to employees.
Yeah. So, Fred Blackwell, Assistant City Administrator. With regard to the Army base, one of the things I think that's important to understand is that the bill that eliminates redevelopment and that was upheld by the California Supreme Court actually acknowledges the existence of agreements and enforceable obligations in the form of contracts that redevelopment agencies can't just get out of immediately. The Army base falls into the category of an enforceable obligation, which will go on and be implemented, whether that is with the city just as the city, or the city is the successor entity to redevelopment.
Laura Anthony, Channel 7. Do you guys have more specifics about, are there some programs in here that will be significantly either reduced or cut, and let the public know what might be missing going forward from the city services? All I heard was reduction of community center hours. Which ones specifically? Are there any programs that might be eliminated entirely?
So I will, when the budget is out, if it's not out already, on page 7 it outlines the community centers that are impacted. The community centers that we are proposing remain closed on Mondays. Would you like me just to read them out loud here? Or?
Yeah.
Okay, so the FM Smith Community Center, the Keys, DeFermery, Mosswood, Golden Gate, Manzanita, Allendale, Brookdale, and Tascaranga. And then community centers where we are proposing remain closed on Mondays, but with expanded hours or between Tuesday and Thursday, San Antonio, Discovery West, Rotary Nature Center, and Arroyo.
And again, these were done based on usage, right? Looking at how much, so the ones that are getting their hours reduced are the ones that people aren't using as much. Any other programs, if the subsidies, for instance, from the city go away?
There are some, absolutely, as the mayor just suggested, our entire redevelopment program is being dissolved. That's devastating, both because we lose a key economic development tool that has proven very useful here in the city of Oakland. And other recommendations are the position elimination that funds our youth commission. We're seeking direction to look at other youth engagement opportunities that exist in the city, as well as subsidies that the city provides to, for instance, Children's Fairyland, the zoo, eliminating the subsidy for the aquatic center.
Jeff Shuttle with Base Reviews. Just to clarify, the numbers, I know it's a dynamic process and the council will have apparently the final vote, but you said it might be more than 105 jobs. Any idea if it a lot more than that, or hopefully just a small amount more than that, or what kind of, what's the range of possibilities the council might be looking at?
We really don't know. We're hoping to have that by close of business. I wouldn't want to pop any number out there. I would just suggest that we had 159 full-time equivalents funded by the redevelopment agency, which when we looked at how it impacted actual positions, it was 230 actual positions. But I won't suggest that that's a natural guide in terms of interpreting how the 105 full-time equivalents will pan out on actual impacted positions.
So in other words, you can't say what might be closer to 105 than 159 or something. Yeah.
That's once we had the adopted budget, we handed it off, and that's the exercise that our Human Resources Department and budget is going through.
And let me just underscore that question. So redevelopment, just when it goes away, what goes away? Affordable housing projects go away. A lot of our planning, Oakland's like the 5th greenest city in the country. A lot is because we do the so-called smart growth, transit-oriented development. Fruitvale is the good example of that, and we're very proud of that. Retail, housing, all that together. That takes planning, and whatever that division goes away. Even our small business sector, which we fought for, and it's helped a lot of businesses get off the ground here. Their staff is really going to be cut, and we're going to just try to cobble together enough staff to keep that going. So anything around economic development, around housing, around long-term planning, is going to be very, very, very hard hit. And so we have some continuation funds. We've tried to bring some positions into the general fund in this budget, but it's not going to be enough, I think. And so we're going to have to learn a new way to work with public-private partnerships, et cetera, to keep going. So it's not a small thing. That's why I think the legislature will bring some things down. A state the size of California has to have an affordable housing program. And if we're going to maintain AB 32, which is the Greenhouse Initiative on developing along transportation, they're going to have some mechanism if they're going to implement those programs. And so we're expecting something to come back, and we don't know what that will be. But right now we're trying to save those programs and maintain those programs until the legislature makes up its mind.
2 questions. One for the mayor is, so how is the average resident going to feel the impacts of these cuts? And then the second question is, I wanted to clarify in those FTE numbers with Deanna. You had said that when it was 159 FTEs, that would have translated into 230 bodies being let go. Now it's 105 FTEs, and you don't know what the translation is. So I wanted to clarify that I understand that correctly.
Can I clarify?
And then I want the mayor to address the other question.
Okay, so let me slow down and explain this step by step. The redevelopment agency funded to the tune of $26 million of programs and services throughout the city. That the way that the city funds positions by full-time equivalent positions, so that translated into 159 full-time equivalent positions. However, in budgeting and funding positions, what happened was certain positions were funded 30% redevelopment fund, 70% general fund. So when we translated the 159 full-time equivalents, which doesn't mean positions, just full-time equivalents, that resulted in actually 228 bodies being impacted, people with positions who were partially funded by redevelopment funds. What is proposed in the budget is position elimination for 105 full-time equivalents. How that translates into actual bodies is the exercise that the Budget Office and Human Resources are going through right now that we have a proposed balanced budget. So that's a number I don't have for you.
Is it logical to assume, though, it might be fewer than the 230? It sounds, you guys seem like you were relieved.
I think it is logical. It is absolutely logical.
We'll know a lot more in a couple of days. You're trying to make us, and we just don't know yet. We'll know more. We're going to be running our personnel figures, our seniority figures, but we'll know a lot more in a couple of days. I think the main point we're trying to make is that by just not responding to the redevelopment cuts, but by starting the reorganizing of the city in terms of less administrators, merged departments, bringing some of the services that are doing the same thing in different departments together, that we're hoping to maximize saving services, which goes to your answer. How will the average Oaklander feel it? Well, they're not going to see it in the libraries. They're not going to see it in human service, my homeless, my senior programs. They're not going to see it there. They're not going to see it on the street in the police, because what we're doing is trying to combine their administrations. But you are going to see it in all those little things that affect economic development. There are going to be a few less people cleaning streets, doing graffiti, et cetera, in our blighted areas. You're going to see that particularly, and it's like the frog and the warm water versus the hot water. You're going to see if my small business assistance center has less people, then you may see less quick starts. A lot of the retail areas have done really, and we're only talking about people. Let's talk about the programs. A lot of my retail areas have been doing better throughout Oakland, because I think in the past redevelopment was used downtown. We've really tried to improve the quality of life everywhere along our transit corridors. We tried to bring grocery stores to the food deserts in East Oakland and West Oakland. We use money in that way in redevelopment to try to develop. So you're going to see, if you look at the Diamond District, which is in the Lowell District, so two of my former districts, council member, which have been voted most turned around districts, I used a lot of facade improvement money to help those new businesses get a new look. We use the money in East Oakland, where some of those neighborhoods are a little dangerous, to have walking officers, so people felt more safe to shop in the Fruitvale area, etc. We bought the cameras that made the Fruitvale area more safer with redevelopment funds. So we've been focusing on people, but those programs are going to be missed and not easily filled. A lot of the art murals that are revitalized, some of these little cute areas that are now becoming very hot. The pop-up stores on Broadway, we help facade and startup funds for that. So a lot of the things that have been very successful in turning these neighborhoods around and producing long-term sales taxes won't be there. And so we're going to have to find other ways to help our business districts get kicked off.
So, just to put I think a finer point on what the mayor said about the average citizen and their impact here, or the effect on them here in Oakland, I think it really depends on how you define the average resident here. The frustrating thing about the loss of redevelopment that's a tool in this city is that it impacts the people and communities in this city that can afford or can absorb this impact the least. Redevelopment is a tool that was targeted towards low-income communities and blighted areas. That means that it is those neighborhoods and communities that will be impacted the most by its loss. We're talking about East Oakland, we're talking about West Oakland, we're talking about folks who need affordable housing, will not have the ability to live in the kind of high-quality affordable housing that has been supported by redevelopment. And if it's an Oakland resident that works in the construction industry, we're talking about construction jobs that won't be available in the future. And so I just want to emphasize that the frustrating part about this exercise is that it impacts the folks who can least afford to be impacted in this way.
Let me take one more question, Carolyn. How is the city able to get from 159, or what was in the neighborhood of 159 layoffs to down to 100. Did the city, was it those new revenue streams, or was there,
No.
how were you able to lower the number?
Let me do it first, because she did all this work. I just want to be clear. We really worked hard to restructure the whole budget. We just didn't respond to the cuts. So we're going to have less administrators. We're combining departments. We reduced administrative costs. We combine people in different departments to have the same function. So because of the really hard work that the whole team did with employee input, we basically saved some redevelopment functions and some jobs that were funded by redevelopment by cutting and reorganizing the city. And that's what I think is really unique. That's if you don't get anything else, we're just not doing the redevelopment cuts today. We saved a lot of services, we saved a lot of positions by reorganizing the city, by cutting administrative costs, by cutting the number of departments. Literally, when you see the org chart, there are going to be 4 or 5 departments missing. Right? They're now going to be merged under different departments, and we're going to be doing things differently. Let me let Deanna say more about it. I just need to say this because I think she's worked very hard. The whole staff has worked very hard. From the day we heard this, from New Year's Eve on, we've been working almost every day, every night, all for the weekends to try to come up with something that would save services for our citizens.
I actually think you said it quite well.
Okay. Thanks very much. As I said, we'll be posting the budget on the website, and that'll be available there. If you have other questions, feel free to see me after.